Hello, this is Jonathan Brown with Proverbial Wisdom. Proverbs chapter 17, verse 3 says, "The refining pot is for silver and the furnace for gold, but the Lord tests hearts." Two reasons that God tests people are for conviction and for endurance. The Lord already knows all there is to know about how good or how evil we are. He never tests us so that He can know the quality of our hearts. He already knows, but so that we may know the quality of our hearts. One way in which the Lord tests our hearts is through the law and His commandments. God originally sent the law to Israel through Moses so that people would become conscious of their sins and aware of how badly they were failing to live up to God's standard of holiness. The law isn't merely difficult to obey, it's impossible. It was meant to convict us, to bring us to that point where we would realize that we were beyond hope if we relied on ourselves for our goodness. The law shows us how wretched we are based on the evil works we've done and the good works we've failed to do. It proves what the prophet Jeremiah says, that the heart is more deceitful than all else and is desperately sick. Jeremiah chapter 17, verse 9. In the New Testament, we see the same principle at work. Matthew chapter 19, Mark chapter 10, and Luke chapter 18 all share the story of how Jesus tested a rich young ruler's heart by giving him a command that pierced through the outer works that this man had done to expose whether his first love was God or his own money. When the young ruler wouldn't give up his money to follow Jesus, it was a searing indictment against him and showed the failure of his own heart. Another way in which the Lord tests our hearts is through trials. James tells us to consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. Chapter 1, verses 2 and 3. Trials teach us to continually rely on the Lord for our strength, rather than on our own, which is a good thing. I know my strength is pretty pitiful compared to God's. James also tells us, "Blessed is a man who perseveres under trial, for once he has been approved, he will receive the crown of life which the Lord has promised to those who love him." Chapter 1, verse 12. Apparently, we will never get far enough along in our faith that we can avoid testing altogether. Paul mentions, "Because of the surpassing greatness of the revelations, for this reason, to keep me from exalting myself, there was given me a thorn in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me, to keep me from exalting myself." 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 7. If the Lord thought that the Apostle Paul needed to be tested in order to maintain his humility, maybe I shouldn't be too shocked when I receive trials in my own life. The key is to rely on the Lord through testing by trial, to realize that God causes all things to work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to His purpose, Romans chapter 8, verse 28, and that we can do all things through Him who strengthens us, Philippians chapter 4, verse 13. Yet another way in which the Lord tests our hearts and our faith is by telling those of us in the church to test ourselves. 2 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 5 says, "Test yourselves to see if you are in the faith. Examine yourselves. Or do you not recognize this about yourselves, that Jesus Christ is in you, unless indeed you fail the test?" That seems rather intrusive, doesn't it? Why would we want to test people in our church to see if they truly believe in Jesus? First, because our assumption that every member of our church is a Christian is probably false. Chances are that somebody in the church that looks Christian on the surface actually isn't, because they haven't repented and placed their faith in Jesus Christ. That's why the author of Hebrews warns us to see to it that no one comes short of the grace of God, that no root of bitterness springing up causes trouble, and by it many be defiled, that there be no immoral or godless person like Esau who sold his own birthright for a single meal. Hebrews chapter 12, verses 15 and 16. Second, because when we test each other, we may find that one of our younger brothers or sisters in Christ truly believes in Jesus, but they have some erroneous beliefs that need to be gently corrected, or they're behaving in a way that doesn't honor Christ. And those are the two areas in which we need to be tested, according to our beliefs and according to our behavior. Testing one another should always be done, though, with grace and humility. We aren't seeking to tear down, we're seeking to build up. Also, before confronting anyone, we should all remember to read Romans chapter 14 to see if a brother or sister's behavior, though different from our own, is actually acceptable to the Lord under the principle of Christian liberty. In the end, we need to remember that only Jesus has passed the Lord's tests through his own merit. That is why we are justified by faith, Romans chapter 1, verse 17. That's why we need God's grace and mercy. Thank God he loves us so much that he grants it to us when we ask him. Thank you for letting me share. This has been Jonathan Brown with Proverbial Wisdom.
Thank you.